This is The Black Knight, an animation test made by Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator behind shows like Samurai Jack, Dexter's Laboratory, and Primal. This animation test was posted on social media in September 2025, and it blew up in popularity, with a lot of people hyped for this project. Although the hype would slowly turn into outrage, as many realized that Tartakovsky originally pitched this project to Sony almost a decade ago, but Sony killed it. Now this brings me to the main question of this video. Why is it that big studios keep killing projects that so many people would like? But before I answer that question, hello, I'm Dino. If you're liking this video so far, please support me and stay tuned for more because I have more videos planned on the way. Now back to the video. Now before I answer that question, we need to understand, how do big studios actually make decisions? You need to understand that big studios are businesses first. They don't care how artistically amazing your project looks like. They only care if it's gonna bring in the big bucks to the table. You have to realize that many of these executives at these big studios are not artistic people. They're businessmen. They make their decisions based on data models, market research, and franchise history. And if your idea does not fit their preconceived notions of what makes money, it dies, no matter how visionary you think your project is. And you're gonna be heartbroken to know The Black Knight was not the first victim of this mindset. There's a whole entire history of studios fumbling amazing projects that they could have made. Here's a few examples of the fumbling done by big studios, but both of the examples are just Sony. In our first example, Genndy Tartakovsky was making the Popeye movie for Sony back in 2014, but they did cancel the project, just so that Sony Studios could focus on quote-unquote more profitable films like The Emoji Movie. One Redditor perfectly captures the anger that many people felt towards Sony for this, with a post that reads, "Genndy Tartakovsky is way too good for Sony Animation. He deserves better than to have his talents wasted at a company who's only interested in making babysitter fodder movies." And before they canceled the movie, there was already so much work done. They had hours of rough animation and a lot of voice acting that was already done for the characters. But later, after they did cancel the movie, Sony would try to make it again without Genndy Tartakovsky, and they would ultimately fail at it. And they just left the project shelved. And in another example of Sony just fumbling the bag, have you ever heard of a little movie called K-Pop Demon Hunters? I don't know if you know it. Well, Sony sold the rights to the intellectual property to Netflix. Likely because they already had a deal with Netflix and they assumed that the movie was not going to be a success. And to everyone's surprise, K-Pop Demon Hunters would break Netflix viewership records and become the most watched original film on Netflix after its June 2025 release. But why is it that studios continue to misjudge audiences even when history shows that they're wrong? There's a few reasons for this, one being that sequels and reboots have been proven to work. There's a reason why Disney continues to keep making live-action reboots and sequels. They actually have been making a lot of profit from these movies, so why do anything else? This is the same company that even brought back an 80-year-old Harrison Ford to play Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones 5. There's also a fear of failure, because one failure of a movie or a TV show can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And lastly, there's just being stuck in the outdated assumptions that big studios usually think of, like they underestimate the demand for darker, stranger, or more riskier animation. But all the while that studios are stuck in this outdated way of thinking, streaming platforms have been showing that these so-called niche projects that studios don't want to do can thrive. Well, talking about Netflix again, streaming platforms like Netflix have capitalized on the lack of riskier projects that audiences want. Shows like Castlevania and Arcane prove this, and even smaller shows have found cult audiences thanks to online fandoms. But the irony is that the old studio model still hasn't caught up with this reality. And unfortunately, that's where the saying, your favorite show or movie that you've never seen before was probably cancelled, comes into play. For every single Black Knight project we hear about, there are thousands of projects just dead in development hell. The ones we even know about are just the beginning of the iceberg. So with all of these things that we've looked at, you might ask the question, why don't creators just go against big studios and publish their own work instead? For one thing, animation is not easy, and it's really expensive. A single feature-length film can cost tens of millions of dollars. Studios also have better control over marketing power that indie creators just don't have. So that's why many visionary projects just end up trapped waiting for a studio to take the risk. But there is a silver lining. Indie animation now is rising more than we've ever seen before. Creators have become more resourceful. They're starting to use strategies like crowdfunding, Patreon, and just becoming YouTube creators. And they're finding ways to bypass big studios. For example, look at Glitch Studios, who made series like Amazing Digital Circus and Nights at Guinevere. These projects gained huge fan bases and proved that there is huge demand outside of the studio system. Fans are not just consumers of content. I mean, there still are, but it's more than that. They're a part of the funding and the support that make all of these projects possible. I leave you now with two questions that you can come to your own conclusion of. Will the future of animation belong to studios or indie creators? And moving forward, will big studios finally do their IPs justice? Well, at least for me, probably not, but it's nice to dream. Thank you for watching the video. My name's Dino, and I'm trying to make 100 videos before 2026. So if you like this video, just subscribe, like, comment, do all of that, and bye.